Hello everyone and welcome to livestream 45 in our Space Shooter DevVenture. So at the end of our last live stream, we'd kind of isolated the work that we needed to do, right? We singled it out, we figured out, okay, well, we're going to work on the shoot behavior and the overall relationship it has in the AI architecture pattern, right? The pattern management and all of that stuff. And then we kind of narrowed that down even further to the point where we looked at the shoot behavior we currently have and all of the surrounding infrastructure, and we said, okay, well, based on what we have, where's all the work, right? What is the most needed space that we actually have to put attention in, right? And so we got the answer, right? So the targeted next steps, where the work is still needed and where to focus, and then also what is the suggested immediate next step, right? The next action we have to take immediately based on the suggestion by Perplexity, right? So to recap, let's just go over that last bit. We don't have to go through everything. If you want to see the full detail of that, you can go back to the previous live stream. It is up on the channel, and you can have a look as we go through that in depth again. But for now, to save time and to make more progress, let's just do a brief recap and then get straight into it, okay? Now, I am taking a risk with my live stream today, and I do ask for your forbearance on that. To counter all my excessive yawning from yesterday, I opened up some of the doors to allow better airflow, and as a consequence of that, there will be noise from the outside coming through. Now, that might bother you, and if it does, I ask you very kindly to bear with me. And if it doesn't bother anyone, then I'll keep it, I'll keep the doors open. If it enhances my performance and I'm able to work at my peak optimum efficiency, or whatever you want to call it, then I'll keep it, and I'll keep the doors open. We'll keep working that way, even if there is just a small amount of noise bleeding through the doors every now and then. So yeah, back to the suggested immediate next action. All right, so the first thing we have to do is double check how or where the NPC behavior manager or the upper system listens for seek completion and then launches shoot. So this is an important thing. We do need to check that. My guess is that yes, it is indeed in the NPC behavior manager, and it's not just for seek complete. It's actually for any pattern complete, right? Remember, we had this on behavior completed. There it is. On behavior completed. Who completed it? What did they complete? What was the status of that completion? And is there additional data attached, right? And so there's two statuses, completed and failed. And yeah, so we've got this on behavior completed function ready and waiting. But as you can see, there's a warning, and this warning is saying there's an unused parameter behavior type. It's never used in the function on behavior completed, and if this is intended, then prefix it with an underscore behavior type. That's interesting. I never thought about this, that there is actually this string called behavior type. Here we see we have behavior type pushing the error, behavior type. On behavior complete, we've got the behavior type here, but we're not using it, right? So that means there is room in this function. There's scope in this function for us to add in specific cases, right? Now we can actually have a match block that matches the behavior type and say, oh, okay, so if seek is completed, then get the status, right? And if the status is completed, then send a signal that we're ready for the next one in the pattern, right? And so on, right? Now, remember that in our design, the NPC behavior manager is the behavior sequencer for a pattern, right? The enemy ship controller, which is the overall high level top tier of the, the hierarchy, the top layer, the strategic layer. This enemy ship controller doesn't care about what a specific ship is doing. All it cares about is what are all the ships doing at this given moment in time, right? And it looks at the so-called big picture, in quotes, big picture, and it sees that, okay, well, we are dealing with all of our pirates, and they are all swarming on the mining vessel, right? And it noticed, oh, hang on, one of the enemy pirate ships, one of my pirate ships has just been destroyed. By who? And so it looks and it says, aha, there's a defender somewhere. So I'm going to call a pattern, I'm going to call the 50-50 pattern. Okay, assuming that there is this kind of pattern called 50-50, right? And it knows that the 50-50 pattern is supposed to take half of the pirate ships and send them to attack the defender who's protecting the mining vessel, and leave the other half to continue their assault on the mining vessel, right? I see we have someone who joined. Welcome to the live stream. I think it's better for me to start calling, to announce the people who join and welcome them vocally, so that we get that feeling of everyone's welcome, And so I was talking about this behavior completed thing, right? And now I was saying that there's this fictional pattern called 50-50, and the enemy ship controller is only concerned with the fact that there needs to be an execution of the 50-50 pattern, right? That half of the pirate ships need to attack the defender and the other half need to attack the miner, and it doesn't care who does what. It doesn't care which half does the attacking of the defender and which half does the attacking of the pirate, as long as that actually happens, right? Then when it comes down one layer into the tactical layer, this is where that concern comes forward, right? Now, every single pirate ship has an NPC behavior manager inside the, its inner workings. And that section determines, okay, well, the enemy ship controller just announced the 50-50 pattern, and I am closest to the defender. Therefore, I should probably go and attack the defender. And so it makes an announcement to the to all the other ships in the tactical layer, right? Because remember, like I showed you in our diagram, and I did open that diagram, I opened it this time, so we have access to it, right? That there's this rule that in each of the layers, so there, in each of the layers, any specific thread, right? So this is for the perplexity layout, right? In managing all the different threads in our space on perplexity. But the principle is the same because I copied that principle from our game, right? Now, in any of these layers, all threads can communicate with each other or one another, depending on how many there are, right? More than two is one another. So we'll assume there's more than two, right? They can communicate with one another inside the same thread, but not all layers can communicate with one another, It's only directly adjacent layers that can communicate, right? So operational layer can only communicate with the tactical layer or with the design layer because they are adjacent, right? Whereas the tactical layer is the most so-called the most adjacent layer. It's adjacent to one above, one below, and one to the side, a vertical layer, right? So it can access all of the other layers that exist because it's the most adjacent. So now, if we are talking about the tactical layer, that's this one, the horizontal one, right? We have all our enemy ships in the tactical layer, in the NPC behavior manager, and each one can communicate with all the others. And it can send out this like announcement to the rest of them and say, okay guys, I'm gonna take down the defender. Who's with me? Right? And so now they all have this understanding in the 50-50 pattern that there needs to be, let's say there were 8 pirate ships and 1 got destroyed, right? Because that's the whole point that triggered the 50-50 pattern. So if there were 8 and now there are 7, that means there's not a clean split. Okay, and we need to have some bias. And let's assume that the bias is towards taking down the direct threat to all the pirates, right? That's the most important thing right now. So rather than diverting all 7 pirates to take down the defender, the strategic layer has seen fit to call a 50-50. Right? Because it doesn't want to lose the mining vessel, right? It doesn't want to lose the quarry or whatever they call it, the prey. And at the same time, it also doesn't want to lose any more pirate ships to the defender. So because the pirate ships are going to continue to be picked off while there's still that defender around, more pirates should focus on taking down that defender, while a smaller yet still significant amount should focus on assaulting that mining vessel continuously and not losing it, right? Because if it gets lost, they're going to have to find it again. So in this case, the bias should shift towards taking on the defender. And that means that if you have 7, that 4 of them should take on the defender and 3 of them should take on the miner, right? And as such, there should be logic inside to manage that they should be able to say, okay, well, you've just made an announcement that you're taking on the defender. That means 3 of us can still take on the defender, and nobody's made an announcement yet. And I am also close to the defender, so let me make an announcement. And so I make an announcement, now there are 2. And you see how this repeats, right? Each one looks and says, okay, well, 2 guys have said they're going. I'm the 3rd closest to the defender. I'll make an announcement too, you know? Kind of like when you're talking in the Lord of the Rings in the Council of Elrond, when it's like, you have my sword, and you have my sword, and you have my bow, and my axe, you know? Gimli comes on and goes, and my axe. And then Boromir joins on at the end, right? It's like, you carry the fates of us all, little one, or something like that. But the point is, there were 4 of them that joined on because of that, right? So one made an announcement, then the other, then the other, then the other. And now all 4 of them are taken. Now nobody can take on that announcement anymore. No one can take on that role anymore. And so the remaining 3 are like, oh, okay, all 4 slots are taken. Let's see what available roles are left. Well, there was attack the defender and attack the miner. Okay, so I guess I'll attack the miner. And he makes an announcement too. I'm going to attack the miner. And now the remaining 2 do the same thing. They check, they analyze. Okay, 4 are taking on the defender. There's another 2 slots for taking on the miner. I'll take on the miner. 1 slot left. I'll take on the miner. No slots left. Everyone knows what they're doing. Off they go. You see how that works, right? So that's the point. That's the idea for the tactical layer, that they all communicate with each other in that way, and that the strategic layer really doesn't care. It doesn't care who does what, as long as they do the pattern. Okay? And in the same vein, the operational layer also doesn't care what the other ships are doing. It only cares what this exact ship is doing. And it doesn't even care about the pattern itself. It just cares what this one behavior, this one specific behavior, that's all it focuses on, right? If it's talking about the shoot behavior, it only cares about who is calling this behavior, right? And what needs to be done inside this behavior. So enemy pirate number 5 has called shoot, and now in the operational layer, it's like, okay, well, enemy 5 is called shoot, and I need to follow these steps. Okay, so I need to get the ID of the enemy, that's 5. I need to determine if the shot is valid. Am I close enough? Do I have enough ammo? Or blah 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 blah. Follow the code and then shoot the projectile. And then when it's done, it's like, hey, I did the shot. And then the tactical layer goes, perfect. Let's see what's next. Oh, okay. Do another shot. The operational layer goes again and says, okay, let's do another shot. And it does a shot and then it reports back. And each of these are interlinked, right? So you'll see that these like signals bouncing around between the layers like this throughout the game. And that's the point, right? It has to be this way because otherwise it's going to be much more complicated. It might seem less complicated if you didn't have this like layered structure with all these signals jumping around. But believe me, it gets much worse if you don't have that structure. It becomes harder to think about. It becomes harder to design. It becomes harder to debug. It becomes harder to validate. All of it. So, yeah. I think we've had enough of that, right? Now, the point of all of that digression that I went on, was to show you that behavior completed has currently got this warning that behavior type is not being used. So let's use it, right? So let's say there's this match. We've got a match block, and we're going to match behavior type. And if the behavior type happens to be, and remember that behavior type is a string, so if behavior type happens to be the string type shoot, then pass. For now, just pass, right? Because I don't want to have that red line, it bothers me. Okay, so inside shoot, it's got the behavior completed, emit shoot. There you go. So enemy ship ID shoot. So this enemy shot and they did the action shoot, right? And the status is completed. We're setting the status to complete, and the data is a dictionary, an empty dictionary. Then we set is active to false. So we know that it's lowercase shoot. All right. Then back in the NPC behavior manager, if it is shoot, right, we need to know what the status was. So let's go back to shoot and we'll see that the status is completed. And now we can go back here and say, okay, well, match the status. So I'm just trying to think, do we need to use a match block for the behavior type? Do we need to use a match block for the behavior type or not? Because that's going to be a problem, right? If we have to use this match the status every single time for every single behavior type, you can kind of see how that's going to inflate into this massive bloated mess, right? Now, what we could do is we could extract this into a function, and then just call that helper function every single time, right? Well, let's do that. We'll do that. And always remember to separate the functions by 3 lines. It just makes the code more readable. It makes the functions separated more cleanly, and there's this nice, neat and tidy separation between each function, and I like it. It's amazing. So let's go back to the bottom. Here. Okay. So I want to make a function, a helper function. 1, 2, 3, 4. I will say here function check underscore status, and this is a helper function, so we don't need an underscore because it's not attached to any signals, and we're taking in a status, right? So we'll take in this thing called status, and that's of type string, uppercase string, right? And down here we'll just use this match block. No, what did I do? Shift tab. Okay. What is it complaining about? Oh, this needs to be tabbed. Okay, now it's talking about this, which is a problem. Enemy ship ID. Okay, so we'll need the enemy ship ID, which is of type integer, and then the status. And we also need data. Is of type dictionary. Okay, so now we can call match status or check status here. Check status takes in the enemy ship ID, status, behavior type, or rather data. Yeah, okay. So as you can see, this information just funnels straight into this, which goes through this check. Okay, and yes, we are basically nesting this match block inside this match block, but it doesn't read that way. Okay, it reads a lot cleaner. So that's okay, as long as it's easy to read and easy to follow. So now you can see, okay, well, we've got this check status function, which just checks if it's completed or failed, right? And when we do the shoot, if the shoot was completed, we just need to make sure that it was completed with a complete and not completed with a fail, right? And then emit the signal depending on that. Now I'm starting to wonder if okay, let me go back to shoot. There should be a fail. Complete shooting with completed. Trigger a shot, aim at position. Shoot on trigger. Target position. Failed. Here we go. Process. If target is null or not an instance, not a valid instance of the target node, then call complete shooting with fail, right? And here we have complete shooting with the status. And the default is complete. And the default for this for data is an empty dictionary, but we can pass in others. So this is the default values, which is cool. That's really cool. So yeah, okay. So there are cases where it passes in a failure, and in that case, we need to call something else. So I think, well, hang on. Why? Okay, never mind. I'm quiet, but I'm thinking. So excuse me. So don't worry about if things are frozen or, you know, I am trying to think it through. I don't want to just keep speaking and saying whatever comes to mind and confuse you unintentionally. I do want to make sense. And so that's why I go quiet every now and then and I think it through, right? So now that I think about it, this check status function, this helper function, it's not helpful. The helper function is not helping. I want this to be a custom match block for shoot. Because remember that in the case of shooting, there is this there's a sequence. So here, there's a sequence, right? Seek, shoot, flee. Seek, shoot, flee. Seek, shoot, flee, and eventually break. Okay, so this is the attack pattern. And you know what's really interesting? I just thought of is that we could actually nest patterns inside patterns. So for example, the 50-50 pattern is it's inherently got the attack pattern built in. It's just you end up telling specific actors or agents or whatever you want to call them. Now AI agent has taken on a new meaning nowadays, and so I'm going to call it instead an AI actor, right? It's the same thing in classical game development theory. An NPC that's controlled by an AI is referred to as an agent, okay? But I'm just going to call it an actor. It's the same thing. Just remember that, okay? So an actor, it just decides which actors are going to do the attack pattern on which target, right? And so there's this like overarching pattern, and then there are subset patterns inside there, right? So it's like the attack pattern, and then some other pattern maybe, or whatever. Excuse me. Yeah, so okay, we'll get to that. You know, we're gonna get there. We'll literally just need to take one step at a time. Okay. Now I want to take this back into the behavior completed body and not have a standardized, I think that's the right word, a standardized match or check status match block for every single behavior type. Because then what's the point of having a helper function then, right? If it's all going to be the same anyway. So what I want to do instead is I'm going to take this out again. And I'm going to do away with this helper function. And then I'm going to put this here instead, like this. Oh, I see. Everything needs to be tabbed in once. Now, you see, this is the part that I was trying to avoid with that helper function, right? Because now you've got indent, 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 indent. That's 4 indents inside a function, right? That's quite bad practice. You'd find that a lot of developers would really find this problematic. And I don't blame them. It's just, in this particular case, having a completed status for for this behavior. My apologies, I took a long time to buffer my thoughts there. Having a custom reaction to the completion of a behavior means that we can't use a helper function, and it also means that in this case we do actually need to make an indented match block. The time where people take exception to all those indentations is when it's unnecessary. If you could have extracted a certain block of code that's been indented like 12 times, if you could extract that into a separate function, but you didn't, then that's blameworthy, right? So in this case, it isn't blameworthy. So when the status of this behavior is complete, we can't say the pattern is complete until there is a next behavior. Okay, so, oh, hang on. We can actually get away with this. We can. So, yes, there we go. We saved it. We don't have to indent so many times. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use data, right? Data will contain what the next behavior is. So there should be, in calling the behavior completed, right? There should be inside data this thing of what the next pattern or what the next behavior in the pattern should be. And that trickles down right from the top, right? So the enemy ship controller should call the pattern, and inside that pattern there should be a list of behaviors. Okay, and it's not the tactical layer's responsibility to know the sequence of behaviors beforehand. It's the strategic layer's responsibility, right? So when enemy ship controller says do the 50-50, right, it needs to pass in data, right? Inside data should be a dictionary, and in that dictionary there should be a sequence, right? And the sequence should be like we've seen, right? Where is it now? Here. It should be seek, shoot, flee, and then break. And there should be this kind of like almost like a graph, but not quite a graph. It should have what the next and what the previous behavior is for each behavior. So a behavior should know what the pattern was. The pattern should have this kind of like almost like an array of all the different behaviors that are, you know what? Yes, it should have an array, and it should also have not just an array, it should have all the edges that lead out from that node, right? So from this node, from shoot, right, the yellow edges, ignore the yellow edges. We haven't added the yellow edges into our logic yet, so we've only got the blue and the red edges, right? So the edges going towards break and the edges taking us in that cycle, right? The red ones. So for seek, we've got two edges, one going to break and one going to shoot, and the same thing for shoot. One goes to flee, one goes to break, and for flee again, one goes to seek and one goes to break. So we've got two edges each, right? And so it should have two separate arrays for each behavior in the pattern. I'm just thinking these things through. I'm not going to do anything with it yet. I'm just trying to evaluate my logic and see, is this a sensible way to move forward? Because if I move forward with this now and I find out that it's not actually going to work and I need to scrap it, then all of the effort I put in to make it was wasted, right? So I want to look at it from a high level perspective and figure out, you know, is this the right thing to do or not? And what data structures will I need in order to get this working? And then from there I can see, oh, okay, well, I don't actually need 2 arrays. I can get away with just 1, an array of dictionaries. Or I can do, you know, I could build my own graph for each pattern. I can make a graph data structure and, you know, like a graph class, and use that, pass in graph objects every time for the patterns or whatever, right? But as you can imagine, making a graph data structure and making instances of that class is a lot more work than just using an array or a dictionary. So that's the reason I'm thinking about it now. Now, going back to GD script. If the pattern is complete, we need to get the next pattern, right? And I'm not sure how to do this yet. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give Perplexity the script for NPC Behavior Manager and Shoot and Enemy Ship Controller. I'm going to give it the 3 layers: strategic, tactical, operational. And I'm going to say, look, I want this particular data flow and, you know, execution, order of execution or whatever. Let's make it happen. And let's see what what Perplexity comes forward with. And if it aligns with what I just told you guys, what I thought about, right? Because I thought it through myself. So you can't say I'm being lazy. I actually thought about this. But for the sake of saving time and making more progress in just a single live stream, let's go to Perplexity with targeted prompts, right? We have an idea of what we want. We already have progress, and we are just asking for advice on where to go from there, right? So let's do that. I'm gonna take Enemy Ship Controller. Where's this thing? Over here. I'll copy this. Okay, so here's the code for Enemy Ship Controller.gd. Paste that in there. Okay. And here's the code for NPC Manager or Behavior Manager. NPC Behavior Manager.gd. Okay, and let's just get that code. Where is it? Over here. Copy that and paste it in. And then also, finally, we need this code as well. And here's the code for behavior underscore shoot.gd. Right. Let's get it. It's over here. Behavior shoot. We'll save that code. Copy. Save it. Copy it. And paste it in Perplexity over here. Okay. This is the most up-to-date version of the code. Not co-ed, the code. I want to introduce a method or maybe I want to introduce a communication of all the behaviors in a pattern. This should start from the strategic layer. If the enemy ship controller let's just double check that enemy ship controller is it's all no underscores. Enemy ship controller, let's go to the very top. It's this one, enemy ship controller, right? If the enemy ship controller calls out a pattern, then the NPC behavior managers in each AI AI actor or agent, actor/agent, must be given the sequence of behaviors in the pattern, and they simply govern how those behaviors are executed / delegated. Is it possible to include the behavior sequence in the data dictionary? That is already being passed between the layers, or must we develop a separate carriage medium for this information? Yes, you can include the behavior sequence as an array, a queue, or another structure in the data dictionary that's passed between your layers. This is both practical and extensible and keeps your system modular. Perfect, right? So the best practice, behavior sequence via parameters or dictionary or data dictionary. How does it work? When the strategic layer assigns a pattern, it can include a new key, such as pattern sequence or behavior queue, in the parameters dictionary that gets emitted. This sequence is then delivered to NPC behavior manager, which can store or manage it, executing behaviors in order as their patterns complete. And then your current signaling method is very flexible, which is dictionary based. You can pass any well-structured data. For example, in the strategic layer, when assigning a complex pattern like variable sequence is seek, shoot, flee, then the parameters are target node, sum node, pattern sequence, that's your new key, and continuous is true, right? And then the pattern assigned.emit enemy ship ID seek parameters. In NPC behavior manager, when receiving pattern assigned or store parameters as a pattern sequence, you store that as a property, and then when the pattern completes, you shift the next pattern from the sequence and activate behavior it. Sorry, I just found that funny the way it said it. It's like activate behavior it. It's like It's just not the right way to say it in English, but okay. If the sequence is empty, then go idle or break. And then the key advantages: no new data carrier medium needed. Your dictionaries already support this. It's extensible, and you can add other information to the sequence elements. For example, a per pattern parameters thing, or consistent with your current module, and it is consistent with your current modular architecture, which is amazing. All right, that's so nice. We don't have to change any more infrastructure. We just extend data to accommodate our needs. That's so nice. It's so nice. I love it when it happens like that. It's so nice. And then concrete suggestions for implementation. We've got our strategic layer. When assigning a complex pattern, always include the sequence in the parameters dictionary. In the parameters dictionary or the data dictionary? Shall I go back to enemy ship controller and see what it's talking about? Aha. So there is a parameters dictionary. That irritates me so much. It irritates me so much that it's not named the same. That it's not called data. It should be data, 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 data all the way down. Or parameters all the way down. Or something all the way down. It should be the same thing all the way down. Fine. We'll ignore it for now. We'll just live with it. Make sure everything works. We can refactor it at the end. Right? As they say, make it exist, and then make it look nice. Or as I like to say, make it work, then make it look nice. Same thing, just different phrasing. And then we've got our parameters dictionary. That's good. So here, when assigning a complex pattern, always include the sequence in the parameters dictionary. And then in the tactical layer, when adding a property such as variable pattern sequence as an array, then on pattern assignment, set the pattern sequence is parameters.getPatternSequence.duplicate. All right, so basically all we're doing there is we are taking the pattern sequence that was sent down from the strategic layer, and we are photocopying it, in quotes, photocopying it, right? So the strategic layer sends a memo to the tactical layer, and it goes, didn't you get the memo? And then the tactical layer takes the so-called memo and photocopies it, and then passes that on to the behavior layers as needed, right? So it looks at that memo and it goes, okay, well, seek behavior, here's the memo. And then seek behavior comes back and says, okay, job done. And then it goes, okay, cool. Shoot behavior, here's the memo. And then the shoot behavior comes back and says, okay, job done. And then it goes, okay, well, flee behavior, here's the memo. And then the flee behavior does what it does, comes back, says, okay, I'm done. And now the tactical layer has to look at the memo again and say, okay, well, all three are finished. There's no breaking conditions met. And so we'll go back to the start and say, okay, well, now seek behavior, do your thing, and then shoot, and then flee, and then seek, and then shoot, and then flee in a cycle until we reach a breaking point somewhere, right? So every time one of them comes back, it needs to evaluate, well, have we reached a breaking condition or not, right? Seek comes back and says, I'm finished. Before it says, okay, shoot, it needs to see, okay, well, is there a breaking condition? Is there still an enemy that needs to be shot at? Because the next behavior is shoot, right? But is there still an enemy? So when you did your seek, did you succeed or fail? Right? Is there still an enemy for you to seek? If you come back to me and say I couldn't find an enemy to seek, that means we should break. We break the pattern and we call the enemy ship controller, the strategic layer, and say, hey, hang on, something's wrong with this pattern. We couldn't find the enemy to seek, right? And then from the shoot should say, oh, okay, well, enemy is now destroyed. And at that case, the pattern is a success, right? The attack pattern is a success because it's not that we failed to find the target. We actually succeeded in defeating the target. And so now the behavior is complete. The pattern is done. And we can tell enemy ship controller, oh, hey, we just completed the pattern. And we are ready for the next one. And then the enemy ship controller goes, oh, awesome, good job. Here's the next one, right? Or it doesn't, because it's waiting for the other actors in the scene to give that same report, right? It's waiting for the other pirates to come back and say, oh, we defeated the defender. We shot him to pieces. There's no more defender. Or we successfully raided the mining vessel, and, all our cargoes are filled up with its load, and we are ready to offload at our capital ship or our depot, wherever that is, right? And once the strategic layer receives a report from each and every one of the actors, at that moment does it say, perfect, the pattern is done, right? And now I can tell the tactical layer to start a new pattern. Unless you want to have parallel patterns. Which could work. It just makes things far more complex than initially estimated. Yeah. Maybe we can work up to that. We'll get there. For now, we just take it as it is in a very, very small domain, and we work up to something like that. So yeah, I went off on a digression, but let's pull it all back together, right? So we add a property such as pattern sequence with an array. Then once the pattern is assigned, we set that pattern sequence. So we copy it. Like I said, we photocopy the memo. And then on behavior completion, we activate the next pattern in the sequence if available, right? Because we've got the memo and we know the pattern and we know the breaking conditions, we just follow the pattern, right? So we are given this as a memo from enemy ship controller. This is the memo. It goes, hey, this is your pattern. It's called the attack pattern, and these are the conditions, right? It goes like this, and there's a breaking condition. So if you are doing seek and you can't find an active target, break. If you are shooting and there's nothing to shoot, break. If you're fleeing and there's nothing to evade, then break, right? And there's also some others, like once you have shot, and that shot makes a hit and happens to defeat the target, then break, right? So it's not just if you can't shoot something, there's nothing to shoot anymore. It's also after you've shot. So before you shoot, you check, can I shoot this thing? And after you've shot, then you check again, did I shoot this thing? And by the end of that, you make a report to the tactical layer again from the operational layer saying, hey, the shot is done. The shot actually hit and it did this much damage. I think we might need to add an extra layer then, because the projectile would need to communicate to shoot and say, hey, I missed. Right? Because the projectile has a so-called time to live. It's on a timer, right? So once the projectile is launched, after a specific time has passed, it will call destroy on itself. And we can actually add that. We can add functionality to that and say that if the shot projectile reaches a timeout, it's clearly not hit anything, right? And therefore the shot was a failure. Not a failure, but a miss. It was not an accurate shot. It missed. And we can report that to our operational layer and say your shot failed, right? And you should probably shoot again or something. Maybe we could, excuse me, maybe we could add that to the tactical layer, right? So we report to the tactical layer that a separate operational layer to the shoot is the shot. Right? So you've got the shoot behavior and you've got the shot behavior, which is the plasma bolt itself. So the plasma bolt will detect if it's hit something, it will detect what it's hit, it will detect what the consequence of that hit actually is, and so on. It's like, I've hit a defender, I've dealt 15 damage, and now I'm going to destroy myself. So the shot was a success, right? And then when a defender dies, it should call a signal to the entire scene, right? To shout out to anyone that will listen, I just got shot. Or even worse, I have just been defeated, right? And so now all the other defenders, all its allies know, hey, our buddy just got defeated. And all the enemies know that that particular enemy was defeated, right? Oh, we took down that enemy. Cool. Now we can focus on the other two, or if there were three, or however many are left, right? And at the same time, we can announce, with just that one signal, we can announce to the tactical layer that this attack pattern can break, because now we're done. We can break out of the attack pattern because we defeated that defender. And now we can call attack pattern on another defender if we have to, right? Because maybe the enemy ship controller called the annihilate pattern, right? Which is to take down all enemies, just wipe them all out, right? And in order to do that, it has to execute attack patterns on each of the enemy actors. So each defender in the scene needs to have an attack pattern executed on them until they are defeated, or worse, until the pirates are all defeated, right? So there's all these different cases, and you see how quickly this becomes absolutely complex, right? It becomes a monstrosity to think about, but it's nice to think about now, even just talking about it, right? Because I can always come back to this and hear myself speak about this stuff. You could come back to this and hear me speak about this stuff. But also, it just puts the ideas in my mind already, right? That I can start thinking about it in the background between our live streams. I can start thinking about it, and dealing with all of the, all the so-called edge cases and whatever else. So that's useful. And so I hope that you are able to follow along with what I've been saying, right? I hope that this all is easy for you to understand. If at any point I'm not making sense, right, and you're completely lost, then don't be shy. Type in the chat and say, hey, I don't get what you're saying about this, or that this one thing is confusing me, could you please repeat it, or could you maybe go into more detail or something, because at this time all I can assume is that I am making perfect sense, and I'm going to keep assuming that I am making perfect sense unless you correct me on that assumption. So yeah, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. And we have come close to the end of the hour. We have about a minute left. So I'm going to do my admin, right? I'm going to make a shout out to our junior DevVenturer. Cubes, thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. And to the rest of you, please do go to coffee.com/mtkdev and support the channel, right? You could become a member and you could pay a monthly subscription to that. And then there are perks associated with each of the 3 membership tiers, right? So there's intern, junior, and senior. And each of them have their own perks, and you'll see them on my Coffee page. You'll find that there, right? And then also the link to my Discord server is in the description of each of these live streams. So please don't be shy. Go to the Discord server and join it. It's a community and it needs you to be part of it, right? So join the community and you'll see everything's there, right? So when I create something for Gumtree, or if I create something for my Coffee page, or if I create something for Substack or YouTube, it'll all be there, right? And I even have role restricted categories of channels in this in the server as part of the community. And so when you become a member on my Coffee page, you automatically get access to that corresponding category in Discord. You'll get the role and you'll get access to those categories. Okay, but if a monthly subscription fee is too much, and you can't afford it right now to have that kind of monthly donations, then consider doing a once-off donation to support the channel. And if that is still too much for you, I don't blame you, but I would ask that you still continue supporting the channel by viewing and subscribing and liking and chatting, right? That's important. Do chat. Engage with the content and with everyone else who's watching, and create a discussion, because that's what keeps things going, right? So when you view the videos, when you like the videos, and when you subscribe to the channel, you're letting YouTube know that these videos have value and that it is a good idea to continue promoting them to others. And then also share, right? Share the live streams with as many people as you can. Share the link, right? Especially while it's still live, so they can join in and raise awareness, right? So just spread spread the awareness as far and wide as you possibly can, and then you've done basically as much, if not more, than someone who's just donated an amount of money, right? I mean, I do need the money, so so I appreciate that, and I thank you very much for those to those of you who did donate money. Thank you so much. And at the same time, I also need the publicity support, right? So like I mentioned, like, subscribe, share, comment, all of those things. Okay, so thank you so much for your time and your attention, and